episode of ACA Cast. With your host this week, my name is Alex Zito. ACA Cast is the official podcast of ACA International, the leading voice of the accounts receivable management industry. On today's episode, we're going to talk about strategies to help consumers pay down the debt during tax season. Last year, the average federal tax return was $2,700, according to the IRS. Today, we have an interview with Anne Rosso May, the managing editor of Collector Magazine, and ACA member Greg Ruffino. Now, here is the interview.
Hi, I'm Anne Rosso May, managing editor of Collector Magazine, and today we're talking about tax season strategies that accounts receivable management companies can use to help consumers pay down debt. Our guest is Greg Ruffino, who is the director of training for ACA member company Williams Fudge. We recently featured some of Greg's insightful tax time tips in an article that you can find in the February issue of Collector Magazine. You can also hear Greg speak at ACA's upcoming Spring Forum and Expo. Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Anne. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, let's start by setting the scene. Can you tell me, why is tax season so important to collection agencies?
Well, yeah, sure. Like almost any kind of business, there's going to be an ebb and a flow throughout the year. Maybe a silly statement, but around this time of year, a lot of consumers experience, obviously, a check in the mail. They now have this new check that came in the mail or got direct deposited in their tax return, and there's a big question: what do I do with this money? And I think I've seen ACA put some statistics out. I've seen my own, but they all kind of hover in that 35 to 40% range of consumer expectation to pay down or pay off debt, specifically once they get their tax returns. So that opens a lot of eyes and ears around the industry, as it should.
So when do you start talking to staff about tax season? What does that training look like?
Great question. So today is, we're recording this, is February 11th. Now is not a good day to start talking about it. It's not the worst day. The best day was yesterday. The worst day is tomorrow, right? But to specifically answer your question, I like to start to plant this seed in our collectors' heads somewhere around the October, maybe even November time frame. It's easy for this to be thought of as something you talk about all year round, but throughout the course of any year, there's lots of other things you want your staff focused on, or other areas that you need to clean up or get better on. It's very easy for us humans to forget things very quickly, so I also don't want to bring it up too early in the year. I personally would think it would be too early to start planting the seeds in October, September, or whatnot, when there might be other things that they could focus on, and it might be a little bit too far out for the consumer to even wrap their head around. So somewhere around that October, November time frame, you can almost start to see and feel the new year coming. And most people associate the new year with it's time to do taxes, and ideally or hopefully I'm going to get my tax return. So around October, November, I start to talk and remind my staff, hey guys, this is coming up. This is a great thing to start talking to about consumers with, and we just kind of reference the planting the seeds. The consumer who can't pay in full today, hey, we completely understand. Maybe we can negotiate a payment arrangement. Ideally, in the next 3 to 5 months, that tax return is going to come, and then we can revisit the account and pay it off at that time frame. So right around October, November, before the new year, is where we at least start to introduce it's that time again to start talking about it.
So what kind of resources do you give your staff when it comes to tax time?
How we do it in our office, and for the folks out there listening, it's for you to make of it however works best for you. I personally prefer, in our office we have a bunch of different collection teams broken down, and those teams will meet a minimum of once a month as kind of like a formal meeting with their trainers and developers, and I'll go into those meetings and I'll give them a personal, maybe 20-minute little in-person conversation or presentation that starts to remind them, this is the irs.gov, this is the website. Let's pull that irs.gov website up on the screen. Let me show you a few pertinent clicks. I want them to know what that website looks like. I want them to know where a few basic points of information are, not only for them, but for them to also tell their consumers. So it starts with in-person. We'll talk about it. I'm going to give them pertinent dates within this presentation. We're going to talk about how certain people can file for free at irs.gov. We talk about pertinent time frames of how long money takes to be direct deposited or sent through the mail, how long it typically takes for returns to get sent back to the consumer. We'll post all that stuff onto an internal intraweb that we have full of other documents and resources, post some calendars, some payment calculators. Beyond that, we're going to dial it up in all our monthly company meetings, because this is not a short window of time. We're thinking this is a potential 4-month windfall, and we're going to talk about it the whole time.
During these conversations, Do you talk to collectors about some of the word choices you expect them to use or that you want them to use in these conversations with consumers?
Absolutely. How things are said are so much more important more often than not than what is said. And you have your open-ended and closed-ended questions. And there's definitely a time and place for a closed-ended question, which essentially means I'm looking for a yes or no. It could be something as simple as, do you still receive your mail at 123 Main Street? It's a pretty simple to the point question. And more open question is going to be kind of forcing that individual to give a more detailed answer. So instead of me saying something like, do you want to use your tax return to pay off this bill? Most people in their mind are thinking that's a yes or no question. The obvious answer in debt collection land is probably going to be a no, right? I'd rather take a vacation or buy that new TV I had my eye on. So it's more about asking open-ended questions. And I might not come right out of the gate with the money. I'm going to say things along the lines of, have you filed your tax return yet? That might be a yes or no, but that's going to at least let me know if the money's been received or if it's still pending. And then from there, I might even ask them questions about, hey, did you file last year? Did you get a return last year? What do you think about using that tax money to pay off this balance this year so this is no longer a problem going into the rest of 2020? So I'm going to just have a very open, honest conversation with them. Definitely not trying to come off as a tax expert either, because we'll be very careful not trying to get our collectors to be tax experts because you're going to make a mistake. But the point being is if I find out that you've had no change of employment, you've had no change of spouse or child care in the last year, and the last year you got about $3,000 back, you're going to fall pretty much in that same category without trying to quote them an amount. You're going to be able to figure out pretty simply that your consumer is more or less going to be getting that tax return. From there, I'm going to ask them, hey, are you going to e-file? Are you going to get a direct deposit? Did you know if you get a direct deposit, that money's going to come to you a lot quicker? And I'm going to ask them all kinds of different things. Where are you going to go file? That way, when these consumers answer those questions, I know that they're giving me a legitimate answer, and those are the individuals I'm going to look to spend my energy and time on with my follow-up.
How do you motivate your collectors during this time? Do you run any specific tax season contests?
Definitely, and in the last couple of years, we've started to dial up one of our nice little tools here is voice analytics. Can plug in, specific phrases or specific singular words or combination of words. And the voice analytics, it's not just recording the phone calls for our data and our records, it's also extrapolating a lot of data. We can see who is not using this terminology or who is using it in abundance. We structure some simple contests based around who is utilizing this the most as a percentage in their talk-offs. We like to show numbers a lot. We can correlate people who have high percentages of using this language correlated with their current collection fees for the day, the week, or the month. We will highlight these individuals on a daily basis on our interweb with posting of different collector totals, and of course throughout our company and team meetings throughout the course of this 4 or so month-long tax season. There's lots of different creative things you can do to get people excited about it because this is a specific time of year. And throughout the rest of the year, you're probably doing contests on other stuff. But collectors in collector land know that this is a window of opportunity for all of us to generate a lot of good revenue, and we need to take advantage of it. And oftentimes, a little contest or a little booster adds a little bit of fun to that as well.
Is there anything, Greg, that I didn't ask about that you wanted to throw in here?
I kind of mentioned at the beginning where I don't want to plant this seed too early in the year. Like, hey guys, it's August, it's September, it's July, whatever the case, let's start planting seeds with the consumer that tax season is really not that far away. The collectors are going to forget about that over the course of several months. The consumer is going to forget about that. So we might start planting the seeds in October or November. I'm going to come in at the very beginning of the new year in January and dial the training back up again. I can look back and say, hey, we had 3 specific meetings, we posted 4 documents, we're trying to run this contest, let's move on to the other items of the day or of the year. Just hope that the collectors retained all that and they're out there doing it. Well, that's going to be a disappointed collection agency when you're looking at your numbers after tax season. This is something that you need to stay on top of. You need to be discussing it, whether it's daily or weekly, in your office and with your collectors. Never assume that just because you trained it a week ago, a month ago, you talked about it, that they're still thinking about it. They're going to forget. Their intensity is going to dial off. You need to be the one out there in the rows, continuously talking about it, sharing successes. Absolutely make the most out of it until you feel, or it's sometime in May, and the very last tax return payment probably came through your office where you can then turn the page to focus on how do we collect debt during the summer months. Bring it to their attention often, Don't let them forget the fundamentals. Remember that we're all humans here, and we all need to be reminded of some of the basic things that help us be successful every day.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for talking to us today.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate you having me back on again.
Thank you, Greg and Anne, for these insightful tips during tax season. The content provided in this podcast is presented for educational and general references only. The content is not intended to serve as legal advice. Third-party content is not endorsed by ACA, nor does it necessarily reflect the opinions of ACA International. You can subscribe to ACA Cast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts so you'll never miss a show. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on ACA Cast.